Hi guys, welcome back to Dimitra's Dishes. So today I'm going to teach you how to make a delicious vegetarian roasted tomato basil soup, and this is going to be a creamy soup, which you can leave the cream out if you don't want it, but we're going to go over the ingredients and we're going to get started. It's a hearty soup. It's so delicious. After we make this, I'm going to teach you how to make a mouth-watering grilled cheese croissant with this, which is so simple to make as well. But before we go there, let's stay on track and let's go over the ingredients so that way we can start making it. So this makes a big batch, so we have lots of tomatoes. I like to use Roma tomatoes, about 2 pounds of them. We have 2 onions actually, some fresh garlic cloves, salt, pepper, crushed red pepper flakes, some fresh and dry basil, but you can use either or, whatever you have. Black pepper, I don't know if I said it or not, some heavy whipping cream, and some tomato paste and a little bit of water. Now I'm using water because I want it to be full of tomato flavor. You can use chicken stock if you're not keeping it vegetarian, or you can also use vegetable broth. It's up to you. Water has been working for all these years, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, the recipe on the website calls for 2 small to medium-sized onions. I only had these big onions, so I'm using 1.5. So I already used half in another recipe. It's really simple. You're gonna want your oven to be preheated to 450 degrees so that when these roast really nicely, you're gonna want them to get really nice and charred, like you'll see in a little bit. And everything goes in this baking pan in big chunks. So this is a super simple recipe to make. Another really great thing about this is that you can make this, and before you add the cream to it and all that stuff, this stays so good in your freezer. It keeps so well that you can make a few batches of this and just pop it out whenever you feel like having some tomato soup, and it comes together in no time. So I'm gonna peel all these garlic cloves. I like lots of garlic in my soup, so I have like 5 or 6 here, and I'm gonna add them to my pan. So I like using Roma tomatoes best in this recipe, but you can feel free to use whatever tomatoes you have on hand. I feel like the Roma tomatoes release less water, so we're gonna cut them into 4 pieces. And we've been making this at the restaurant since we've opened. I think it's one of the most popular foods that we have on the menu. It's delicious, it's creamy. This, a nice grilled cheese croissant, and a nice salad on the side is a full meal that's very hearty, and as you will see, it's so delicious. If I ever have leftover soup, I like to add it as a pasta sauce, and it makes for a really, really good pasta sauce, especially if you cook it down a bit. But we're going to continue cutting these tomatoes and putting them in our pan, and then we're going to finish seasoning them. Alright, so once you have everything in the pan, you're just going to drizzle some olive oil, about a quarter to a third of a cup. If you wanted to put more, be my guest, but I'm going to put about that much. Season with salt, pepper, dried basil, and some crushed red pepper flakes because I love some heat in the soup. If you don't, you can just leave it out. If you had some dried oregano, you put some dried oregano as well. If you didn't have dried basil, you can throw some fresh basil leaves on here. And then we're just going to mix this all up, and we're going to bake it for between 45 minutes to an hour until everything is fully cooked, and you're going to see the vegetables that are around the edge of the pan, they're going to get a little bit of a charred color, and that's what you're going to be looking for. Alright, so my tomatoes cooked for 45 minutes. It was more like towards an hour because I love to get these dark charred bits. It just adds so much flavor. I also let it cool so it's easy to handle. You don't have to, but I did because in the meantime I cleaned up a bit. Now, I like to puree this in a big, like powerful mixer like this one. If you don't have one, you could do it by hand in like a hand blender, that's fine too, or in just a regular mixer. Now I'm going to put this in batches in my mixer right here, and I'm going to puree it until it's super smooth with the tomato paste. And I'm going to keep adding water to it. I have 4 cups of water right by me. Again, if you're using vegetable stock, go ahead and use that, but I'm going to be using water. And when it's really smooth, we're going to transfer it to our pot. What I love about these high-powered blenders is that there's a hot soup setting, and that it really just blends it really smooth, and then you don't have any tomato skins in here. Okay, so you see how smooth it's gotten in that blender. If you don't have a high power blender and you're doing it with a hand blender or a regular mixer, it's going to be a little bit more on the chunkier side, and that's completely fine too. That'll taste just as delicious. Now this is a little bit too thick for it to be a soup, so I'm going to thin it out with a little bit more water. Again, if you were using vegetable broth, you can go ahead and use vegetable broth at this time, but we're also going to put some cream in this, so leave some room for about 3/4 of a cup of cream. I'm going to let this warm up and thin out a bit, and then I'm going to taste it for seasoning and see if it needs some more salt and pepper, and then we're going to garnish it with some basil. Alright, so the soup is warming through. At this point, we're going to sweeten it up with a little bit of sugar because the tomatoes are quite acidic. So I'm going to start with like 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. And if you want to keep out the sugar, that's fine, but it really brings out the tomato flavor if it's lightly sweetened. And this makes a big batch, so you're really not getting that much sugar. Let's taste it now before we add the rest of the seasonings. I think it needs just a little bit more water, and it still needs a pinch of salt. So we'll put some salt. I like that kick and warmth that the crushed red pepper flakes lend. Leave them out if you don't like that. And now we're going to go in and taste it one more time before we add the heavy cream. For me, that's perfect. If you like it, if your tomatoes are a little more acidic, or if your tomato paste made it a little more acidic, go ahead and add some more sugar, but this is fine for me. Now we're going to put the heavy cream in here. This is about 3/4 of a cup, and then once it warms up, it'll be good and ready. So our tomato soup is almost ready. I'm going to slice these fresh, very aromatic basil leaves so we can garnish our soup with to add some more beautiful basil flavor. So we're going to make a grilled cheese croissant, which is just delicious. If you're going to go big or go home. If you don't feel like making a grilled cheese croissant, you could do this with white sandwich bread or whole wheat bread, that's fine. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. It's nice and hot. I'm going to cut the croissant in half. I have a baking pan here with a little sheet of parchment paper. You don't need a really big one. And let me transfer this over here. And then you can use your favorite cheese. You can use shredded Gouda, grated mozzarella like I have here, Parmesan, whatever. My favorite combination is grated mozzarella and crumbled feta cheese with a little bit of basil. If you had some pesto, store-bought or fresh, just smear some inside the croissant. I don't have any. I should have made some, but I really didn't have time. But honestly, at the restaurant, we serve this croissant just like this, and you really don't need anything else with it. But if you really did want to put some pesto in here, it would totally take it to the next level. And the pesto is made with basil, and since there's going to be some basil in the soup, it's just going to tie it in all together. Let me also put some basil in here. I'll put some of this basil in here. You can also put dried oregano or dried basil. I'm going to cover this up, pop this in my oven. It should take about 5-6 minutes for the cheese to melt and for the croissant to be super nice and toasty. And we'll put it all together and plate it as soon as this is ready. Alright, so my tomato soup, my creamy roasted tomato soup, and my grilled cheese croissant is completely ready. The grilled cheese croissant is still nice and hot, and it's going to be so creamy with the feta. And the mozzarella is going to be really nice and melted. I've already garnished my soup with some basil. Make sure that you put your tomato soup in a beautiful soup bowl, and then you serve it to your guests in the most delicious way. So now, another thing that you can do, you can serve this soup with some Parmesan cheese. I wouldn't put Parmesan cheese in it because some people, they want cheese and some people don't want cheese. So leave a little beautiful bowl with Parmesan cheese on the side, and whoever wants to can sprinkle it onto their soup. It's time for the taste test. I'm going to take a little bite. Do you see how cheesy it is? That is perfection. And then, the croissant is nice and crisp. I could taste the creaminess of the feta with the mozzarella is nice and mild and melted. And now to taste the tomato soup. Get some basil in there. Again, a lot of times during the colder months, we're in winter time right now, it's not so easy to find fresh basil. And at the restaurant, we never use fresh basil. We always use the dried basil, dry basil, is really aromatic, so you can go ahead and use that. I would just put a really nice generous amount in it. You're going to want to go to the website www.dimitrasdishes.com. I'll have these recipes on there and so many more. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you're going to make any of these recipes, share them with me on Instagram and Facebook. I love to see your recreations. Let me know what else you want to learn how to make. If you've tweaked it and made it a different way, made the recipe your own, let me know. Thank you for spending time with me today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.